Before I start this video, I want to shout out everybody in San Diego. If I got some facts wrong, no disrespect to y'all hoods and the OGs who started y'all areas. I'm not speaking on the trenches as an outsider. I really come from this shit and been around this my whole life. I'm not your average cornball YouTuber. I started this channel because what I seen on other channels didn't represent well. So to all the San Diego Damus and Lokes, if I was misinformed, my fault. But this episode, I will detail the Grape Street Crips out of the Jordan Projects versus the Bounty Hunter Bloods out of the Nickerson Gardens. When people think of Grape Street, they may think of rappers like 03 Greedo. Also, they may think of the movie Menace to Society, which has some scenes shot there. When you think of Bounty Hunters, you may think of rappers like J-Rock and the record label TDE, who was started by Top Dog from Nickerson Garden. But Watts has a lot of history. Is one of the major players in Los Angeles and the gang world. Many gangs in Watts have different branches all over the country. But Watts has so much history past gangs. The area we know as Watts began its history with first being settled by Mexicans. But by 1870, with an influx of white Americans, much of the land would be sold to them. In 1907, Watts would be incorporated as its own city. The city of Watts would get its name from Charles H. Watts, a leader in the community at the time and a landowner. In 1926, the city of Watts would vote to become a city in Los Angeles. But as we know today, Watts is known as a community on the east side of South Central. By the 1940s, many black people would leave areas like Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi during the Great Migration, leaving segregated areas in search of better opportunities, and Watts would become one of the many areas that black people will settle in. Projects will initially be made in Watts for housing for workers in World War II. By the early 50s, many workers would leave to other cities and buy homes, and by 1955, the projects would be turned into public housing. Many believe this was to keep Mexicans and African Americans from moving into affluent white areas. By the 1960s, Mexicans and African Americans were all you would really see in Watts, but this will also cause a lot of racism against them. In 1965, many black residents will take a stand and challenge the police for their constant disrespect and the treatment they receive. It will last for 5 days. This will result in burning buildings and destroyed cars, and over 1,000 people hurt. Over 3,000 arrests and 34 people will lose their lives in this incident. This will cause many white people to leave the area and leave nearby cities like Compton, and this will be called white flight. By the late 60s and early 70s, before any beef between the Nickerson Gardens, which is known as the Bounty Hunter Bloods, and Jordan Downs, known as the Grape Street Crips today, those two were allies called the Green Jackets, but that would later fade out in the 70s. The Latinos in Jordan Downs would be one of the first established gangs in Watts called Watts Varya Grape, WCG. They are close allies with the Grape Street Crips and always have been. But in the 1970s, the Jordan Project's black residents would take on the Crip identity, later on becoming Grape Street Crips. Though being Crips, they picked up many Crip rivals throughout their history. They beefed with the PJ Watts, Fudgetown, 99 Mafia, and later on the East Coast Crips. Some of their blood rivals are Hacienda Village Bloods, Circle City Piru, and of course, Bounty Hunter Bloods. Grape Streets have some good relationships though, with a lot of Compton Crip gangs, the Hoover Criminals, and the A-Tray Gangsters. The Jordan Projects and the Nickerson Gardens will have a strained relationship after the Jordan Downs will become Crips, causing them to later become rivals. The Bounty Hunter name came in 1971, according to OG Frog from Bounty Hunters. The Bounty Hunters would choose not to become Crips and to remain anti-Crip, gaining rivals like the Backstreet Crips, the Front Streets, the Fudgetown Crips, the PJ Watts Crips, and the Grape Street Crips, and many more. They also gained Compton Crip beefs, with Compton and Watts being so close. They beef with gangs like the Carver Parks. They have good relationships with blood gangs in Watts like the Hacienda Village and the Circle City Piru. For all the issues between gangs and Watts, in 1992, something positive will happen. PJ Watts, Grape Street, Hacienda Village, and Bounty Hunters will come to an agreement to have a truce. 4 representatives of each set will sign the document for a ceasefire. This will help LA in the moment, but this wouldn't last forever. Many people have thoughts why the peace didn't last. Many believe it was the police's fault for bringing back past issues, with them inciting issues and actually causing them. Unfortunately, Bounty Hunters and Grape Street still beef to this day. With that being said, I'm gonna get into a few cases between both of the gangs. The first case is about Alonzo Phillips, a member of the Bounty Hunter Bloods. Around 10 p.m., October 31st, 2012, officers would see a fight break out in a group of more than 40 people, then a series of shots. 3 people would be shot: Courtney Cooks, Deshaun Smith, and Taylor Cooks. Police recovered 8 shell cases from the area and determined it had to be one shooter. Courtney Cooks told the police in the hospital that the shooter was from Nickerson Gardens and that the Nickerson Gardens were rivals of the Jordan Down projects. Cooks would describe the shooter to be 18 to 21 years old and being 5'9" to 5'11" in height. Alonzo Phillips was 18 at the time and around 5'10" in height. He would appear on a nearby motel surveillance video before the shooting. Cooks would pick Alonzo Phillips out of a lineup as the shooter, but he told police he did not want to testify. He was later threatened by the police of being arrested if he didn't testify. He would retract all his statements, saying he was drowsy and on morphine when the police questioned him. After being arrested, police would place an informant in Alonzo Phillips' cell to get info on other cases against Grape Street and the case he was fighting. Alonzo would tell the informant he was from Bounty Hunters, and the night of the shooting, they were outnumbered by Grape Street, and that he did the shooting on his own. The police would use that in court, and also his social media accounts where he would show his deep hate for Grape Street. He will also mention the incident at Knott's Berry Farms, where he would run into Grape Street members and whip out on them. His messages on social media accounts, he will argue with Grape Street members, and him and his rivals will disrespect each other's homies who have passed, and their intentions if they happen to see each other. Alonzo Phillips will receive 40 years to life. Marlon Williams and Darnell Shell, members of Bounty Hunters, will be detailed next. November 6, 2012, Snell and other members of Bounty Hunters will be in a fight against Grape Street, which escalated to shooting, and one of the Bounty Hunters being shot in the leg. Snell will tell other members that they were going to get the shooter. Later that night, Snell and Williams drove into Grape Street territory. They drove past 8 to 10 people, and they parked on a nearby street. Snell and Williams would get out the car. They would walk toward the Grape Street members, and Williams would ask them where were they from. After that, he would begin to shoot. Before Snell could fire, the crowd would scatter, and him and Williams would run to the car and drive off. Ashton Crosswell would lose his life. Even though the police had no evidence or witnesses, Williams and Snell both would be arrested. They were placed in a cell with informants. They would admit that Williams was the shooter and Snell was with him. That would be used in court, and they will both receive life. October 4th, 2015, a drive-by shooting occurred. The car involved in the shooting was owned by George Stanford. Stanford admitted to the police that he owned the car, but that night he did not drive or wasn't in the car when the shooting happened. Stanford would say his friends from Grape Street, Julius Sanders, known as Jay Scabby, Eric G., and Anton Presley, known as G3, would take his car. He said he was asleep and only knew his car had been taken because it had been in a crash and his friends were shot. Surveillance video from that night showed a black Mercedes stopping near the Nickerson Garden projects and the front passenger shooting. The intended targets of the shooting would run. Someone on the other side of the street would begin to shoot at the Grape Street members. The Mercedes would speed away but crashed into several parked cars. 2 individuals later identified as Presley and G got out the Mercedes and ran. Sanders would get out the car after them and run in a different direction. Officers will identify the 3 from surveillance video. Officers will also find blood in the front seat. It was confirmed to be Presley's as he was shot. Eric G. earliest release date is 2032. Anton Presley's is 2029. And Julius Sanders is 2027. July 18, 2016. The police responded to reports of shots fired on the Nickerson Garden Street. The man shot was Justin Hammer. The police will recover 38 shell cases. The shooting was captured on surveillance. A white Benz and a dark BMW would pass Hammer, and he was shot. Police officers would go down to Jordan Down projects for leads. They would spot the white Mercedes and wait for the driver to return. Video surveillance would show that Harris, a Grape Street member, had parked his car right after the shooting. He would return to his car after 5 hours. He would take police on the chase, but eventually be caught and taken into custody. 2 hours after the shooting, police seen Grape Street member Philip Ridge driving a BMW, but police would not arrest him until a month later. Police would confiscate Ridge and Harris's phones. Their phones would show phone calls between the two, then show both of them leave Jordan Downs to Nickerson Gardens. Harris and Ridge were both benched and handcuffed together at the county jail, and their convo will be recorded by a hidden device. They will talk about how the police had their cars, pictures, and videos of them driving past Nickerson Garden. Philip Ridge will receive 40 years to life, and Davion Harris will also receive 40 years to life as well. This case will be about an occurrence of events. A Grape Street member will lose his life weeks before August 3rd. A group of Grape Street members will gather in Jordan Down projects, including Deshaun Smith, Lakeem Marty, Carnell Lawson, DeAnthony Bradford, and Vernon Williams. Vernon Williams would come up with a plan to retaliate against the bounty hunters. At Williams' direction, the group would get into separate cars and stayed in communication using cell phones. Vernon Williams and DeAnthony Bradford would take a Mercedes and would be the lead car to look for victims. Smith, Marty, and Lawson will take a Nissan. The group would first drive to Howard Hughes Center in Culver City, where Williams believed they would find bounty hunter. Williams would direct the group to shoot at a Maserati. Williams would tell the other Grape Street members that the Maserati had bounty hunters in it. The driver would be hit, but he survived. Following the shooting, Williams was not satisfied and made the group head to Nickerson Gardens for more targets. After scouting the area, Marty would stop the Nissan near a field where a group of people were. Lawson would fire until the chamber was empty. Smith was unable to fire shots, and no injuries will be reported in this shooting. The Grape Streets next went to a nearby park. Williams told the group they wasn't done because they didn't catch a body. They would stop at a gas station near Nickerson Gardens looking for a victim. They would spot Dugal Cordaro and his girlfriend in a Chrysler. Paul Richmond was standing nearby. Smith would say, "What's up, cuz?" then began firing. Dugal Cordaro would lose his life. His girlfriend would be hit, and Richmond hit as well. Marty and Smith would be arrested the next night. Smith would tell police Williams forced him to commit crimes, and he was beat and forced into a car. He denied doing any shooting and put it all on Marty and Lawson. Lawson and Bradford will make plea agreements, under which they would get reduced sentences if they told the whole truth. Carnell Lewis would receive 28 years. DeAnthony Bradford would receive 9 years, and Lakeem Marty received 25 years. And lastly, Deshaun Smith was sentenced to life. This concludes this episode of Warren Cali. If you haven't already, check out my previous videos. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.